Thank you very much, Anu, for this kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to your celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking forward to talk to you today on a topic which was mentioned already today earlier, entrepreneurship on the one hand, but also feed and food safety and food security. And if we translate this term feed safety, food safety and food security into the customers, the consumer's language, what would be the term? People say, ladies and gentlemen, please tell me, actually, how are you producing my meat? This is a question we did not receive that frequently some 10 or 20 years ago. Today people want to know. And this is what I would like to have a look into closer with you today in my presentation. The good thing is, everything we do in animal production is on a growing market. And why? Because there is a growing number. Who can imagine what this is? This is the growing world population in real time. So currently, actually not currently, this was earlier this year, we have been at 7.6 million. Every day we are adding some more than 100,000 births, which is the double compared to the deaths. And just last week, we stated at 7.7 billion people who wants to live and who wants to eat meat as well. And this is what is our responsibility from the animal production side, that we supply those people with high quality protein. This is actually what the animal protein industry is producing in value. So in terms of numbers, it's actually nobody can catch this number. The value of the global animal production is currently approximately 1.5 trillion US dollar. Is this a lot or not? The current value of Google is in the range of 200 to 300 billion dollars. So it's a lot. Compared to other brands, it might not be a lot. Let's translate it into some figures which we can better understand. If we convert this value into quantity, we can say we produce in our industry currently 1 billion and approximately 400 million tons of products from animal origin. Still difficult to understand, but if we take this down again to one parameter, which is the protein, then it becomes more clear. Globally, the animal producers are producing 85 million tons of pure protein from meat. Approximately 25 million tons is coming from milk, 20 million tons from seafood, and 10 million tons from egg. If we divide this number by the current world population, we are arriving at approximately 45 grams of animal protein eaten per person per day. But this is not the same across the world. What I brought here is the different consumption patterns in the different regions of the world. So here on your left side you see, for instance, India. So this here, the width of the column, is representing the number of people behind, and this level here is representing the protein eaten from either plant protein, the green one, or from animal protein, which is the red one. And you see India is a very nice example. The total protein consumption in India is very low, and the part of animal protein is also very low. Let's see the other end of the consumption patterns. It is Brazil, European Union, the United States. You see the majority of protein is consumed from animal origin, while the plant protein is much lower, approximately 1/3 of the daily protein intake. What you see is that it's not necessarily a high difference globally across the different regions in their protein intake from plants, but what is added on top is the protein from animal origin. And then we have some regions in between, where, like China, where we see currently a clear trend in increasing this consumption from animal protein. The Middle East and Northern African countries, the rest of Africa, the Latin Americans, they are going to switch with a changing living standard also into a higher protein consumption. And if we want to see this or compare the living standard of those countries here with their protein consumption, there is a very nice correlation, which is, here I plotted the income, the family income, or we can also say the GDP, the gross domestic product of a country, compared with the protein consumption from animal origin per day. So in average, as I said, in a global average, we can say each person eats 45 grams of animal protein per day. But there is an obvious correlation with low GDP countries eating lower quantity of animal origin. And with a growing GDP, here United States, Germany, France, I think Estonia must be somewhere here, we see an increasing consumption of animal protein. So Estonia, I checked, I think the GDP should be here somewhere in the range of France and Italy, and the intake should be in the range of 60 kilogram per year. So I would expect Estonia to be here somewhere. This correlation did hold true the last 20 years. The higher the income, the more protein from animal was consumed. But now we have to have a closer look, because the world is changing. There is, first of all, this huge part of the world, mainly driven by India, where people are saying, okay, due to my cultural and confessional background, I don't want to eat more meat or animal protein. And then we have those huge regions here where people say, okay, if I would have more money available for my daily consumption to feed my family, I would eat more meat. But the limiting factor is the family income. And then the European countries, the Northern Hemisphere countries, also the United States, here we have a more special situation. Because here we find all different behaviors in terms of meat or egg or milk consumption. Because here we find the no meat eaters and the high meat eaters. And all of a sudden we see that this correlation between GDP or family income and consumption of animal protein is not a question of the money anymore. There are different questions which the consumer is asking us as an industry. There is a very interesting study published in the International Food and Agribusiness Management Review, which was distinguishing different types of customers, consumers, in terms of their meat-eating behavior. So they distinguished between a group of high meat eaters, 38% of their daily intake was meat. The average intake meat eaters, around 19%, and the low meat eaters. I want to add one group of people, which are the no meat eaters. Who is this? The vegetarians and vegans. And our industry is having so much look on those people, on this group of people, which we consider as a threat for our future business. What is the rate of vegetarian people in Estonia? Are there figures? Actually, I could not find, you know. I found this study here. Actually, it's not a study, it's a summary from Wikipedia. This is the only one data I got. And we see, okay, this is known, India, the rate of vegetarians is in the range of 40%. And then we see Germany estimated at 10%, Austria 9%, and I would say Latvia is here in the range of 4%, and I would estimate that here in the North European region we might be here somewhere in this range. So it's currently 4 to maybe 10% of the people. And we all look to those people and try to convince them that meat is something good for us. What we don't consider is that 95% of people are still eating meat, are still want to have meat in their diet. The vegetarians, they will have their motivations. We should let them do what they want to do, and it's justified. Why not? But what about the remaining 95% of the consumers? And these 95% of the consumers are seen here. And as I said, this group here we call vegetarians, and there is a new term coming up, which are the so-called flexitarians. So that's those people who eat meat, but it's not a necessity, who skip meat all week, but have meat on the weekends. And the interesting thing is that these different groups of people, so the high meat eaters, the average meat eaters, and the low meat eaters, they are putting different questions on our desks as an industry, as animal producers. In this study, it was evaluated which type of questions they put. So here we go. Here we have again, the dark blue are the high meat eaters, the medium meat eaters, and the low meat eaters. And what we can see clearly here, to the right, so everything which goes to the right is positive, and this is rather low rated. So what we can see is that the high meat eaters, they have a general preference for meat. That's fine, which is not the case for the low meat eaters, for the flexitarians. The trust into the agri-food sector is higher in the high meat eaters than in those people. But let's have a look on the other topics. Animal welfare, very important to these low meat eaters. Normative influence, what is this? What is my family doing? Is there my daughter who might, or my son who might be vegetarian? Then I align the nutrition of my whole family according to this one person. What are my friends doing? Figure awareness, eating of animals, an ethical aspect, health awarenesses, environmental awarenesses. So all of a sudden, those people ask us different questions than those high meat eaters and the generation before. And let's have a look on, first of all, the animal welfare topic. When is this question asked regarding animal welfare? It's asked exactly here. When this person, the young consumer, is taking the decision whether to buy meat or not, and which type of meat to buy. And it was mentioned earlier already in terms of regional origin, has to come from the region, it has to be natural, it has to be animal welfare. And here at the meat bar in the supermarket, these questions might be raised. So what about animal welfare? And if it comes to animal welfare, what is this nice young lady thinking about animal welfare? That's the picture. That's the picture. If the animal is out on the grassland, by the way, the grassland would not look like so green if the chickens are out. It's brown, it's earth. But this is what the consumer believes what animal welfare is about. Is this really the case? The consumer thinks that approximately 68%, according to this study, say animal welfare is given if no other animals are harmed. For instance, the dolphin-safe tuna. Animals are raised in a natural environment, so like the chicken on the grassland, as I mentioned earlier. 63% say animal welfare is given if the animal does not receive hormones or antibiotics. Completely misleading, right? Companies support animal welfare organization, 51%, and animals are fed only organic, sorry, there is a typo, organic feed. 33% of people say or believe that then animal welfare is given. My question to you, you're the specialists, how would you define animal welfare? We get an electronic answer. But before I ask this question, it is also interesting to see what the consumer claims. The consumer claims on the question, how much would you pay more for per kilogram of meat for high animal welfare? 50% of the consumers say, I would pay €5 more per kilogram of meat if the animal would be raised under animal welfare regulations. We know this is the opinion poll effect. At the meat bar, at the buying decision as such is taken then differently compared to what is said in these opinion polls. But anyway, what is the definition of animal welfare? And there is a quite famous organization on the animal welfare sector, which is the World Organization for Animal Health, which is a subdivision of the Food and Agricultural Organization. And they define animal welfare. An animal is in a good state if it is healthy, comfortable, well-nourished, safe, able to express its behavior, and it is not suffering from any pain or injuries. What I want to point out is that here in this definition, we're finding one point related to the nutrition, to feed. Also in another definition, with regards to animal welfare, which I like much more, is the animal welfare according to principles of freedom. The principles of freedom are saying an animal is well kept if it is free from discomfort, if it is free from hunger and thirst, free from pain and injury, if it can express normal behavior and free from stress. And again, what we have here is this freedom of hunger and thirst. So all the eating behavior is closely related to the overall animal welfare topic. And this is where also the reason why we, Biomin, as an animal nutrition company, talk about animal welfare, because we consider animal welfare partly influenced by the nutrition. Last but not least, one definition which is made by the Food and Agricultural Organization. It is also interesting. They say animal welfare is given if each of the animal has appropriate space at the feeding bar, at the feeders, that it does not have to fight for its feed because this is causing discomfort. It is interesting to see that the European Union started an initiative which is the European Strategy on Animal Welfare, and they opened a new feed additive category, which is called the physiological condition stabilizers. So in general, we call it more or less the animal welfare improver. And this is a new category which relates very closely to the presence of endotoxins, to the control of endotoxins, but not only. It relates to the reduction of ammonia in the animal houses. It relates to the reduction of food bed lesions, heat stress and stress reduction, to reduce the negative impact of vaccines, reduce inflammation, the disease incidence, and the mycotoxin effects. Because you can imagine if there are mycotoxins in feed and these mycotoxins, like the group of trichotillins, are having dermal toxicity, nephrotoxicity, neurotoxicity effects, that these animals do feel uncomfortable. So we would consider that mycotoxin risk management is a relevant part of animal welfare measures in future to improve animal welfare and to meet the European regulations and also to meet the consumer's question on that. Let me have a look on the next point, which is the environmental awareness from this study. So also a question, what's the impact of the global animal production on the global warming? What about the nitrogen and phosphorus pollutions? And again, what is this lady when she is at the meat bar and thinks about the environmental effect of this piece of meat she's holding in her hands? What is she thinking about? That beef kept outdoor, sorry, not beef, it's still a cow here, or cattle kept outdoor compared to an indoor high-performance herd. Which of those two groups of animals is considered to be environmental friendly? This one. What this young lady at the meat bar does not understand is that these animals are emitting less carbon, are producing less nitrogen and phosphorus pollution compared to low performance and extensively kept animals. This is a kind of misleading and misunderstanding of many consumers, maybe because we are not able to communicate this topic properly from our industry to the consumer. Here we go. Here we go. That's actually the C, N, and P. That's the three molecules which are of relevance in terms of emissions from the animal production. So the C is standing, the carbon is standing for the carbon dioxide, the ammonia, the N standing for the ammonia pollution, and the phosphorus for the phosphate and eutrophication topic. I would like to mainly focus here on that point, on the carbon emissions from animal production. I think after having Greta Thunberg traveling around the world, this became a huge topic again. What is the impact of all our activities? What is my personal footprint in terms of carbon dioxide, also coming from my meat consumption? Let's have a look here. There is a report called the Livestock Long Shadow. I recommend that you Google for this report. It's written by the Food and Agricultural Organization. And this Livestock Long Shadow is having very interesting global maps which display where in the world and which type of animals are contributing to the global warming. And here you see, those very high bars you see here are the ruminants. Ruminants are considered as high contributors to global warming. This can be questioned and this can be discussed. But what this report is stating, that 18% in the first draft of the report, and today 14.5% of the carbon emissions are coming from animal production. That's quite hard facts. This is a bit more than the transport, a bit less than the energy sector, but there is an effect. We can question these figures. It could be less, it could be more. But the thing is, the consumer believes that meat consumption, and in particular beef consumption, contributes a lot to this part here. What happens now in the world? Now all the animal rights or the animal activists and environmentalists are claiming this. And what is our answer as an industry? Very weak, because we actually don't know how much we really contribute. This is the reason why Biomin started an initiative already 8 years ago to assess all our own activities in terms of carbon emissions, which is, by the way, ISO certificate. So this is the ISO 14040 certificate, which claims or which underlines that this evaluation, what is done here, is correct and done in a proper way. What did we do? So in Biomin, we were assessing everything we are doing in-house. So our traveling, my flight to Estonia goes in, all the employees, all the waste we produce, all the raw materials we are using, the transport activities, and all this is the so-called Biomin life cycle assessment. So from cradle to gate. And with this, we can calculate for all our products the carbon footprint. We know exactly how much carbon is emitted for the production of 1 kilogram of poultry star, of 1 kilogram of microfigs. This is what we know exactly. But then there is another effect, which is the effect of our products at the animal, on the performance and health of the animals. And this is the second part of this life cycle assessment, which we call from gate to grave. So this is an overall view on these carbon emission patterns. And what we can say today, these are the last year's results. Our entire group, the ERBA group, where Biomin is part of it, we are currently emitting 115,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year. 1,500 people, everything we do, the majority, sorry, this is in German language now, the majority is coming from the raw material production, from the transport, and from the energy side. But it is as it is. But on the other hand, we did these studies where we say, okay, we produce 115,000 tons of carbon per year. But if we feed it to the animal, we developed a tool where we can calculate the carbon savings because of the increased performance, the better health, and the improved feed conversion rate. And I brought one trial here with digesterone PEP, MGE. Due to the improvement of the feed conversion rate, 1 kilogram invested or 1 ton of carbon invested into this phytogenic product saves at the animal production side 128 tons. So those feed additives are extremely highly efficient in terms to reduce carbon emissions also from our industry. This is confirmed by this recently published Penn State University review, so to say, where they say, what are the potentials, which measures can be taken from the animal producers in order to reduce the carbon emissions. And what they say, okay, there is the first and highest impact is coming from a proper grazing management for cattle production. To improve feed digestibility, and this is very clear, the less feed per kilogram of growth is needed, the less the carbon emissions. So these are the two highest impacts. Then they call it the use of feed additives with a certain impact, and then it goes down to animal management, rangeland rehabilitation, and so on and so on. But they consider the use of feed additives and the improvement of feed conversion rate as one of the best and major measures to be taken in terms of reducing emissions. This brings me to the last point here, or before last point here. Another question which this nice lady at the meat bar might ask, what about the health? What about the health awareness? Is this meat good for me? Is this fat from animal origin good for me? And in particular, what about all the antibiotics they are using to produce this meat? In the eyes of the consumer, our industry is still considered as the one putting antibiotics, high volumes, high quantities antibiotics into feed. What the consumer does not know is that in all European Union, the use of feed antibiotic growth promoters is forbidden since 2006. And since that time, the consumption is also reducing and going down. Actually, this is very nicely stated in a lot of reports. This is the so-called SFAC report, which claims that, for instance, only since 2011, 25% of antibiotic use could be reduced in animal production. Why is it necessary to reduce antibiotics and further reduce antibiotics? Because antibiotic use in animal production creates new resistances, which is not true. Antibiotic resistances exist since thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. Why? We could find, not we, the scientists, could find antibiotic-resistant bacteria in the digestive tract of mummified people, of mummified persons, which are 100,000 years old. And also already the bacteria 100,000 years ago were able, or were carrying these antibiotic resistance genes. And why? Because the bacteria had to protect themselves already at this time against naturally produced antibiotics, which are produced by fungus. So it is a natural protection mechanism of bacteria. But what happened in the last years? If you see here, this is a microbial population. The blue ones are not carrying any antibiotic resistance genes, while the yellow ones are carrying antibiotic resistance genes. It's a natural mix. And with the use and overuse of antibiotics, it happens that all those bacteria which are not carrying antibiotic resistant genes are killed. And who survives? These ones. And this is the reason why the use of antibiotics is leading to a selection for antibiotic-resistant genes. So there is not necessarily the creation of new resistances, the problem. The problem is this shift of the bacterial population when antibiotics are used. And we could see this very clearly. In many of our trials, we see if even we keep animals, broilers, in pens, one next to the other, and we feed no antibiotic here and antibiotic here, the antibiotic resistances go up in this group, which is just next to the other pen because of this effect. And that's the problem. And maybe a second thing to be stated, what we believe, strongly believe, we believe that antibiotics are highly valuable substances and of high importance for all human and animal health applications. So we have to protect antibiotics to keep them working, to keep them active also for the future. And this works mainly due to the further reduction of the use of antibiotics. As I mentioned already, this SFAC report is counting or is evaluating the use of antibiotics in different countries in Europe. And this is the current status. Actually, this is the 2016 report, which is the latest one. And in this report, we can see the overall consumption of antibiotics expressed in milligram per PCU. This PCU it's standing for the production corrected unit. Actually, we can easily say this is the milligram per kilogram of animal produced. And we see here Austria, which is close to 50 milligrams per kilogram of animal produced. We see, where was Estonia here? Here, in the range of 60 milligrams. We see Hungary in the range of 190. We see Italy close to 300. And we see Spain close to 350. So I thought we were in the same legal system. There is an extremely high variation in the use of antibiotics. So just to express here again, what we can see, Estonia, 64 milligrams, Finland, very low with 19 milligrams, Latvia at 30 and Lithuania at 38 milligrams, which is already a quite good level. The reason here, we should not forget that in each region where animal production density is lower, it is easier to reduce the use of antibiotics compared to other regions where the density is very high. But I would like to show you a second effect. A second effect, and let's have a look on the usage of those three countries. So we have a very high use of antibiotics in Spain, which is the red arrow. Then you see here the Germany, close to 100, and Denmark, which is in the range of 40 to 45 milligram. Antibiotic use. And now we compare it with the antibiotic resistances. You know, there is a difference, use and resistances. And I would like to point out again these three countries. So if we remember, it was Spain with a very high use of antibiotics. 60% of E. coli are carrying antibiotic-resistant genes against tetracyclines. So 60% are resistant to tetracyclines. Germany, lower use, only 40, what is it? Yeah, 35%. And Denmark, very low use of antibiotics, very well controlled, and a very low resistance level. See here, on this side, Bulgaria, Brazil, Algeria, almost 90 to 100% of bacteria are resistant to tetracyclines. And if I would be the farmer, I have to ask myself, is this really the environment where I want to work in an environment where all the E. coli are resistant against tetracyclines? Not at all. So it's not only for the consumer, it's also for myself as a farmer, as an animal holder, that I want to have this situation here and have very low resistance gene levels in my farm. It is not, what I showed you here is the single resistance. So I was talking here about E. coli against tetracycline. There is another problem which is called the multi-resistances, and the same report is also showing these multi-resistances. It's a bit difficult to explain, but let's take the Estonia example here. In Estonia, we can, this report says that approximately 60% of the E. coli is not carrying any resistance. 20% is carrying resistances against one antibiotic, approximately 5 to 8% against 3, and here the red bar is against 6 resistances. If you compare with Spain again, sorry, it's in black and white, but in Spain the non-resistant are only a very small part, and most of the bacteria are carrying multi-resistant antibiotic-resistant genes, and this is another problem which has to be considered in our field. Biomin is conducting a lot of studies. I decided not to show you all the details here. Do I still have time? 5? Okay. I decided not to show you all the details, but I would like to point out that we in Biomin are doing a lot of research in the antibiotic-resistant gene effects of our products. Today we know, and we can say, we know from our products that they are not increasing and not contributing to antibiotic resistances. And with the use of our products and replacing antibiotics, we see a downward trend in the antibiotic resistances in animals, which is expressed here and here in this trial. I don't explain, but you see that poultry star in this trial and Biotronic in this trial and Digestrom in this trial, they all were able to reduce the antibiotic resistant genes compared to the control group, but also and mainly compared to the antibiotic group. Why is this so? Because you remember what I said, we see with the high use of antibiotics a very strong shift of the bacterial population into this direction, and by stopping or reducing the use of antibiotics, we can see a downward trend. We can reverse this effect, and over time we will arrive at this level here again at a more moderate and low level of antibiotic resistances. And there is a good chance, and I would do it as a farmer for myself, and I would do it for the consumer to answer these latest questions on the antibiotic resistances. Last but not least, if the lady is smart, she might say, okay, that's all nice. You reduce antibiotics, you reduce carbon emission, you control phosphorus emissions, you increase animal welfare, but the meat is for the same price like 10 years ago. So do I get this all for free? This appears at this lady, but who carries the costs? Who is the one who carries the costs? Actually, she is right. It is not for free. I brought here the production costs in comparison to other regions in the European Union compared to other regions. I shortened this a bit. And what we can say is that the production costs for broilers, for instance, in Europe are approximately 6% higher compared to other regions, simply due to the nitrogen directive, 0.3 euro cents per kilogram broiler produced. Ammonia emissions, 0.3. Salmonella control is costing us a lot. Meat and bone meal ban, growth promoter ban, 0.8 cents per kilogram of broiler produced. So it is proven, and we know that European production is more expensive. But the lady, the consumer, is getting this for free. So who pays? Who pays? And this, I use this slide now to explain how these costs can be covered. This slide shows you the so-called contribution margin of the swine producers in Austria, actually, in 2001 up to 2015. And the contribution margin is very volatile. It's sometimes high, sometimes low. And this contribution margin, this is the income minus variable costs. And this is the part which has to pay all the fixed costs. And the fixed costs are here, this grayish part here of this graph. And this difference here in between is the so-called profit, what stays in the pocket of the producer. So you see, in average, there could be made some 10 euros profit per fattening pig in 2012. In 2009 it was minus, in 2007 it was minus, and here again it was minus. But this is just the average. Let's distinguish not only seeing the average, but seeing the lowest performers and the highest performing farms. And you see that the low performing farms, they are just making some profit in those years where the prices are really good. And most of the time, they are not even paying their own fixed costs for the land, for the houses, for the people. While a high-performing farm, like here, they are making good money here when the price is high, when everyone makes money. But see here, a farm on a high performance level is the one which makes also profit in low price situations. And this is our message from Biomin. We want you to be one of them. We want to make our customers to be one of them, because only then they can survive the low price situations, and only then we can pay for all the additional requirements from the consumer regarding antibiotics, regarding animal welfare, regarding environment. So who pays? We can only pay it if we maintain the performances high, and to maintain the performances high, we have to have healthy animals, high performance animals to keep them producing. And with that, I would like to thank you for the attention with this statement, the future belongs to the innovators. Thank you very much.